Alright, so it's been about a week since my last video, and I think that's about a good time to really get my ideas down. And I do believe that as time goes on, I will be able to get better at formulating my ideas. Now, this isn't me making these videos are not just for me, it's for other people to criticize me on my ideas so that I can formulate them better. I really want an open space for people to be able to share these ideas and use them for the betterment of society, etc., etc. Now, I'll try to tackle hard subjects and things like that. And I do believe my mind will change on certain things. However, this week I want to talk about cultural appropriation, and I've been thinking about it for a while. And what I see is that people who argue against it just say that's stupid and end it at that. Whereas people on the left, I shouldn't say left, people who argue for it would say that that's not an argument. You don't change anyone's mind like that. Now, I completely disagree with cultural appropriation, and I've been on about a while, had that idea for a while. And this past week, I've finally been able to formulate an argument, because most people don't use an argument. Only the people who are for cultural appropriation usually do an argument. And it's wrong to be against something if you can't, well, I shouldn't say wrong, but you shouldn't be completely against something if you cannot formulate a good, coherent argument against it. And there is one. There is a very good one. And I'm going to try to lay that out. Please forgive me if I stop for a few seconds to collect my thoughts. But in the process of making this video, I've gone through and had to stop a few times because it's a pretty in-depth thought process. Now, there's a few things I want to touch on, and I'm going to start with the transference of ideas. Now, what happens is in societies, ideas are transferred, and that's how societies advance. Now, in the modern age, we have the internet, and that's one of the greatest inventions of all time, because the ideas in society can be transmitted in a matter of a second. So someone in China can have an idea that affects someone in America, an entire ocean apart. And this allows societies to advance much quicker. Now, cultural appropriation only talks about culture, the way people dress and the way people act. But I do believe that the end point of it is that all ideas that are taken from a separate culture are cultural appropriation. So I'm going to start with the easiest part to debunk, which is the transference of ideas. And the reason it's so easy to debunk is because if you do not allow it, it is to the detriment of literally everyone in any society, anywhere. So I'll start at the beginning of time, the beginning of humankind, the beginning of human civilization. So, how human civilization started was in the beginning. There was a river called the Nile River, and every year it floods. And along this area, I believe it's a mile wide where it floods, It refertilizes the soil. So people are able to replant plants along this area. Now every year they replant plants because it's a natural refertilization of the soil. And that's the easiest place to start cities. It's called the cradle of civilization in the history books along the Middle East. Now at some point someone was able to realize that if you have a cow or an animal who poops in the fields, that you can use it as fertilizer. And they were able to take this idea of farming outward. Now, as they took it outward, people were able to farm in different places, in different areas. Now, with those ideas, they also took culture. Now, I'll get onto that a little bit later, but the idea is that if you say the cultural appropriation can also be with ideas and technology, then you have to say that only people in the Middle East can farm. Now you could make an argument that other societies figured out how to farm on their own. Now, that would be... I do not believe that someone arguing cultural appropriation would say that just because you figure it out on your own means that you are able to use it. Because the idea is that someone had it first. It's the idea of I got there first, so therefore it's mine. Now, going on further, I shouldn't say most. I should say the most successful. The most successful ideas in the world, cultures, are exclusive, meaning they try to export their ideas rather than import. And most societies do this because it's better to have people like you than not like you. So by arguing for cultural appropriation, you're arguing against what would be good for the societies. So Christianity, Muslims, and Judaism all come from this one area, and they are very exclusive. All three religions want people to become a part of them rather than exclude them from themselves. So we also see this in other religions where they try to include people rather than exclude people. Now, with the ideas that transfer through society, culture usually comes with them, because usually in those olden type of days there would come some sort of respect or ritual or whatever would be with an object. Now, Now, if we take something like gunpowder that was created in China, it was more, I believe, and you can correct me, but it was mostly used for fireworks whenever they created it. Now, they transferred these ideas to Europe, which then they were used for guns and things because they had better metal workings in Europe, where they were able to make guns that make metal that could survive refiring. Now, if you say all well and good and all, that's just technologies, and we don't care about that. We only care about culture. Now, if you look out on all of societies everywhere, especially today, we are meshed together through the internet. You have people who are friends on forums from any given place on Earth, and you can pick anywhere, Russia, America, and anywhere they can share a common language you'll find people who are friends. And that's overall a good thing, because in history past, you wouldn't be able to do that. And the reason why it's a good thing is because you're more likely to see these other places as your friends rather than your enemies. Now, if you have no communication with people from any other land, then you can only assume that they are probably not very friendly, or if they are friendly, to be cautious around them, because you generally don't know anything about them. Now, the idea of cultural appropriation is a very inclusive one. It is to the detriment of humans overall, because if we are able to share ideas and share our cultures, then we can become more together instead of creating separate groups. And what happens whenever you argue for this cultural appropriation, the idea that you should keep these cultures distinct from each other, is that you end up showing the differences between them instead of showing how they can be alike. And that's a very dangerous thing to do, because what tends to happen whenever people show the differences between the groups, then they become outgroups towards each other. And whenever you do that, they no longer look at each other as friendly as they did before. And we can see this in human psychology. Now, you might say, well, what's the harm in that? You allow people to keep the same cultures. What's the big deal? There's a very big deal with that. And the thing is, because once you... if you're somewhere, and say you're any race, and take any race, and you can come up with it on your own. I don't want to be shown as a racist, so I'm not going to pick one. So, you're somewhere in any society, and then you look at something and you say, I like that. I want something like that. Or I want to go to a place. Or I want to do a certain thing. And then someone comes up, oh, that's not for you. That's for that person. Or those people. You really have to look at the language there. Those people. That's not for you. It creates a huge divide. It is literally like Jim Crow laws. It's saying you cannot act or be a certain way because you were born wrong, or you were born in the wrong area, or you're a part of the wrong culture. And the problem with that is the only thing that can come from that is resentment. You don't get love from that. You don't get the cooperation of societies and the social cohesion. And that's extremely detrimental. It's extremely counterproductive, because what we should be striving for is social cohesion across countries. Because with the invention of the internet, we can see that people are going to start becoming friends cross-culturally. And people are going to be able to make societies more... It's quite hard to put this in the right terms. Make countries to where they are less aggressive towards each other. And we're not quite there to where we're able to see that yet, but you will see it over in the next 20 years, because most of the people who've been on the internet have only been on it for 10 or so years, or just growing up with it. Now, that's a very good thing, and we can see that cultures are coming together more and more, especially the close ones. I mean, you see Europe, they make the European Union, although it's a very bad thing. The European Union, the way it's set up, is awful. The idea of it is not awful. The idea of countries coming together and us becoming one big human race is not a bad idea. That's a very good idea. And by saying that's cultural appropriation, you point out the differences between these people and you say they cannot come together. They cannot share these things. And that's really awful. But I think I'm going to start just rambling on if I haven't already. So I think I'm going to stop it right here. I don't want to bore anyone with my thoughts. But tell me what you think in the comments below if you watch this. And tell me any ideas you have to improve me. That's weird. To improve the way I make my videos. Because I do want to get better. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go, so y'all have a nice night.